As more people jump into and bow out of the 2020 race, entrepreneur Andrew Yang is still pushing a message he's been touting since his campaign started in 2017. I recently sat down with him. He says his first priority as president would be to implement a universal basic income.
A universal basic income is a policy where every citizen in a country gets a certain amount of money free and clear to do whatever they want. So my plan, the Freedom Dividend, would give every American adult $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year starting at age 18. This would create millions of jobs around the country and would allow families and individuals to help manage this historic transition that we're in terms of technology transforming the labor force. And so this idea, it's new to many Americans, but it's actually as old as the country itself, where Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country. He called it the citizens' dividend. Martin Luther King was for it in the 1960s. Milton Friedman and 1,000 economists signed a study saying this would be great for our society. And one state has had a dividend for 37 years, where everyone in the state of Alaska is getting between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what they're doing in Alaska with oil money, we can do for the rest of the country with technology money.
And in New Hampshire, you have a family that you're already testing this out with. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we had dozens and dozens of submissions in New Hampshire, and we picked Jodie Fossey, whose mom, and such an American story where the father lost his job recently and then happily has found a new one. The mom, Jodie, cleans houses around the area, and then their daughter is a sophomore in college, and they have these massive tuition bills. And so the Freedom Dividend has been this great source of relief to them. They haven't even spent it. And one of the things that that gives me such pleasure is that people talk about, it's like, oh, if you give everyone $1,000 a month, you know, it's somehow going to cause problems. But then when you see it in real life, you realize that $1,000 a month just makes people breathe a little easier and live a better life.
President Trump has been talking a lot lately about socialism, and it's no doubt going to be something that we'll hear a lot more about as we head into 2020. What do you say to Americans who hear this idea of universal basic income and think socialism? It sounds a lot like socialism to them.
Well, I'm a CEO and business person, and I'll tell you that putting money into people's hands, it's good for business, it's good for the economy, and it's good for markets. This is not socialism. This is capitalism, where income doesn't start at zero. And if you think about where Americans are going to spend that money, they're going to spend it at their local businesses, their Main Street economy. And this is a great way to help supercharge those businesses for the next number of years.
But for people who hear that and say, yes, but ultimately it's still the government handing out money, you would say what?
Well, you have to look at what's happened to our economic system over the last number of years, where all the relationships that we've taken for granted with capitalism, where if your company grew rich and successful, you'd have to hire lots of people, you'd have to treat them well and pay them well, you'd have to pay them at least as well so that they can afford to buy your services, the way Henry Ford said, like, how do my workers buy my cars? Now, in today's economy, you can create a very rich and successful business that doesn't employ lots of people. If it does employ people, it can employ them as gig or temporary or contract workers. And it does not need to pay them well enough to buy the goods and services, because you can sell globally. And so all of the things we've taken for granted about capitalism are now changing, and we have to evolve with the times.
So you've cited the rise of automation as the reason why we need universal basic income. And the last time we spoke was for the CBS and Originals called Replacing Humans. You said we were going through, quote, the greatest technological and economic shift we've ever experienced. Do you think that other Democrats running for office need to be talking about this issue?
You know, I'm happy to say they're catching on, and I'm hearing from more and more candidates that we are in the midst of this historic shift and that we need to start evolving and adapting our economic system. And so I think I might have had something to do with the fact that now it's top of mind for more candidates. But I'll tell you, it's a top of mind for many, many Americans. And so I think it's going to really stay front and center in the months to come.
So you're going back to Iowa when? Monday? Right?
Monday for the 9th time, that's right.
For the 9th time. And I wonder how you've been targeting early voting states. And do you think that you'll make it on the debate stage here this summer?
Well, you know, when I talk to people in Iowa and New Hampshire about what's happening in the economy, they get it immediately, because Iowa itself lost 40,000 manufacturing jobs and is in the midst of, it's already lost 12,000 retail jobs, and 30% of the malls and stores in Iowa and nationwide are closing. Iowa is the home to the largest truck stop in the country, Iowa 80. And so when you talk about the automation of truck driving, it hits really home for them. So I'm getting a great reception in the early states, and I'm very much on track to make the debates in June and July, both in terms of polling and in terms of the number of individual contributors to my campaign.
And so you've raised a lot of money in February, as I understand it. What was that figure?
We raised a little less than $600,000 in the month of February alone, and March is on track to be even better.
And what do you think, you say you saw a spike. Why do you think that is, that you saw a spike in February?
Well, we had a number of people find out about us in the month of February through various media opportunities, but the most invigorating thing about it is that the hundreds of thousands of dollars, the average donation was only $16, and we got donations from literally tens of thousands of Americans from every walk of life around the country. So this is truly democracy in action, and the campaign is just growing exponentially over time.
Already, even though we're just into March of 2019, we've been hearing already talk about Medicare for All, the Green New Deal, and your focus is on universal basic income.
Yes.
Is there enough room to kind of focus on these big thought, big ideas on the Democratic side? And what are your feelings regarding Medicare for All and the Green New Deal?
Well, I love these big ideas because it shows that the Democratic Party is trying to solve the real problems on the ground in people's lives. And so certainly health care has been a massive, well, it's the #1 cause of bankruptcy for individuals around the country still. We're spending twice as much as other countries on worse care by the numbers. And so the fact that people are proposing sweeping changes, I think, is very much appropriate and grounded in the way people are experiencing our system right now. I think the Green New Deal also, in many ways, it's overdue for us to be trying to wrestle with the fact that the 4 warmest years in history have been the last 4 years. So it's not that climate change is sneaking up on us. I mean, at this point, it's right in front of our very eyes. So I love the fact that Democrats are proposing these big, bold ideas. And I think universal basic income, the freedom dividend, is going to also join those other 2 ideas in terms of the forefront of the discussion.
Last question. You're, of course, a businessman. Another New York businessman said that he was not going to be running come 2020. Michael Bloomberg said this, quote, "It's essential that we nominate a Democrat who will be in the strongest position to defeat Donald Trump and bring our country back together." Do you think you're that Democrat?
You know, I do, because when I'm in Ohio or Iowa or New Hampshire, I get dozens, hundreds of people coming up to me saying they voted for Donald Trump and they're going to vote for me. One person actually said, I'm who they were hoping they were getting when they voted for Donald Trump, because I'm an outsider, I'm a business person, and I'm trying to solve the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. So if I'm the nominee for the Democratic Party, I'm going to beat Trump hands down in the general election.
Okay, I know I said that was the last question, but one more final question. This is a moment when the term identity politics is resurfacing at a really interesting time when, on the Democratic side, there are a lot of candidates who are not shying away from their background. In fact, they're sort of highlighting the very things that would, separate them from others. How much of a factor is that for you as a Democratic candidate here coming up in 2020, this question of identity?
Well, I am the first Asian American man to run for president as a Democrat, and I'm very proud of my heritage and of being Asian American. But I think my race is essentially a non-factor for most of the Americans I talk to around the country. They're just looking for someone whose vision will improve their lives day to day and the lives of their families. And that's, I think, what most Americans are looking for.
Is there too much focus, you think, on the idea of identity already heading into 2020?
You know, I can't speak for others. I will say that the way I approach these problems is to try and put forward solutions that will actually make a difference in people's lives. And I know people want to get to know the candidates for president. I'm very happy to share, my own story. But to me, we've been trafficking a little bit too heavily in symbolism and imagery, and we have to actually change the reality on the ground.
Andrew Yang, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.